Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on your time zone, and welcome to this morning's Creative Contessa Medieval Sip and Stitch. As usual, if you have questions, you were asleep, stay asleep. Trying to get the kitten to be here all cute for you all, but I think she just wants to frolic. Unfortunately, she was dead asleep. Here, sit in my lap. So, as usual, if you have questions, please pop them in the chat. I will be happy to answer them. If you have comments, if you'd like to discuss anything, please, the chat is here. I'm here. I'm happy to chat. I'm perfectly capable of holding forth into the void, but I definitely prefer to interact with people, even if it's only in the faceless chat window to the right of my live feed screen. So this morning, I'm in Korea currently, so this morning for me, most likely this evening for probably most of you, I'm going to continue working on my new giornea. This is the sad giornea of woe, the one on which this little darling baby peed last week. Yes, thankfully the stain is not very visible at all. It looks more like a hard watermark and you have to really look for it, and it doesn't smell either. I've bought some enzymatic cleaner. I want to find some scraps and see what it does to this. I don't want to take it to the cleaners yet because it's not yet finished, and there's a lot of raw threads that I'm concerned could be disrupted by the dry cleaning process. So I will be continuing working on this. We are now almost done with the hem, on the front hem, and then while we talk today, I will be working on the back hem. So yeah, that's my plans for our sip and stitch. What plans do you all have? Do let me know in the comments or the chat. The chat, yes. And if you're just now joining us, I ask you to please, if you're enjoying it, please hit that thumbs up and leave a comment after the video publishes. Otherwise, let's get sewing. Okay, baby. I can't sew with you in my... No, I knew. I know. She loves playing with my hair. She thinks my hair is all sorts of fun. That's why I have a scratch on my forehead, which thankfully is mostly healed because she was playing with my hair. Okay. Onward. So... let's see what I have to do. I see my second device is quite lagging. That's annoying. I have two screens specifically so that one you can actually see. You can actually see me. Did the other one? Technology. I love technology so much. There it is. And now my sound is coming through this other phone, which is not the bestest thing. So hold on a minute while I try to fix this. Unfortunately, there's no way to turn off the sound entirely on this second device because I don't know why. There's an automatic function where if you're connected via live stream or some kind of phone app, it will not let you just turn the volume all the way off. And I really hate when devices take the power away from you. So I'm trying to use my Bluetooth headphones to take the sound so that I don't have to hear myself coming back at myself, because otherwise I hear myself coming back at me. I apologize for this. We might have to get rid of the second phone. Unfortunately, these new phones definitely have a downside. I'll give it one more shot to see if I can actually connect this headset successfully. If you're just joining us, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for being with me this morning for this hopefully very soon to be sip and stitch. I apologize for this. Yesterday I had an older phone at my disposal, which allowed me to plug a headset into it. But of course, new phones no longer allow you to plug anything in, because why would they do that? Why should you have control over things like whether you want to use Bluetooth headsets or regular headsets? So I was hoping you'd be able to actually watch me sew. And it was connected and it disconnected. Couldn't pair. Okay, well, I think unfortunately I'm just going to have to do away with the second screen, because otherwise I'm going to be hearing myself come back at me. I apologize. This was a new experiment, and I forgot this morning as I was setting up that I have a different phone this morning. So I apologize, everyone. Let's get sewing. Okay, so I'm going to see if I can disconnect the second. I'm going to see if I can disconnect the second screen so it's not just taking up bandwidth for no reason. Okay, that should hopefully give us the full screen sooner than later. Okay, it did. Okay, so what I'm doing, we're now onto the back of this particular gown. So this gown has a long train in the back. And so for the back, I'm going to be, as I was saying yesterday, I'm going to be applying this band all the way around the hem on the inside, and it will be folded back so that there's just enough that it pokes out about 4 millimeters beyond the shell fabric. And so this is what will be taking the brunt of the dragging and dirt damage caused by wearing the garment in places that are not pristinely clean. And let's be honest, even indoor spaces are not pristinely clean. Oh, thank you. Oh, you're very kind, Adam. Adam says I'm very pretty. I don't really view myself that way, but I have a certain charisma. I'm kind of regretting having awoken the kitten yet, because now she wants to, or pick the kitten up out of her bed, because now she just wants to play everywhere. No, no, no. Go to your bed. Kittens, man, kittens. Yeah, so that's some of you know that little Nobby story. She's a rescue kitten. Um, and we rescued her when she was probably about 4 weeks old, 3 to 4 weeks old. And, so we hadn't planned to have a kitten. That wasn't part of our life goals, because we already had 2 other rescue cats that we adopted in the autumn, and another rescue cat from our previous time in Korea, who's staying at our home in Washington. So that brings us to a total of 4 tiny house tigers who rule the roost, and that's just a really top-heavy organization. So definitely is not my preference to have 4 cats, but now that we have them and they're part of the family, I wouldn't want it any other way. Of course, I do spend most of my time just cleaning litter boxes, I feel like, and discussing the consequences. And right now, our little kitten is having issues, shall we say, peeing in the appropriate places. It's not that she can't. She can. She knows how. She just sometimes doesn't seem to want to, especially if she's, doing other things that she prefers to do and not interrupt for very long. Oh, yeah. This is joggery. The rest is modern. I wear a lot of hanbok in general. I just like Korean fashions. They're very nice. I'm not working on hanbok. I just wear them in my daily life. I think hanbok is a very elegant style of clothing. And it's definitely much easier to put on hanbok than it is to put on 15th century clothing. 15th century clothing is it's usually about a half-hour minimum for all the layers and hair, etc. And that's not even all the layers. That's just the first couple of layers. And then if you want the top layer and the headdress, then it becomes a 45-minute to hour process. So yeah, it's definitely easier to put on hanbok than it is to put on 15th century European clothing. Let's see. Question is, have you thought of doing a vlog on Isabella d'Este? Oh yeah, Isabella d'Este is a fascinating figure, and actually I have a very interesting book called Shopping in the Renaissance. Can highly recommend. And it has several sections about Isabella because she was a notorious shopper. And she apparently actually went to Venice and actually went shopping herself in the marketplace, which at that time was completely abnormal. Upper class ladies did not go and do the shopping themselves. They had servants for that thing. They had agents. They usually just issued orders and things were purchased and brought for them. But she apparently paid a visit to Venice and actually went shopping for herself. She also sent agents and had quite a collection. But yeah, Isabella d'Este is and Beatrice d'Este. The Este family is a very interesting one in general, starting from the early 15th century, because of course you have Leonello d'Este. He was a marquis and then he was elevated to a duke. And he's the one who founded the University of Ferrara, which was at the time, one of Europe's greatest centers of learning and continues to be a center for liberal arts learning to this day and for culture, of course. And Leonello's court was a bright, shining example of 15th century culture and sort of the height of everything. He was the warrior prince. He was the philosopher warrior king. So, that's that. I think Leonello was I don't think he was their grandfather. I think he was like their great uncle. The Este family tree is not a straight. It's very complicated. The family trees of the Italian the powerful Italian families with all the cadet branches and everything. It can be quite a mess to trace back who was related to whom, especially because of the naming conventions. Wherein, grandchildren are often named after their grandparents. And so you've got multiple Lorenzo de Medicis and multiple Giuliano de Medicis and etc. Yeah. The fabric looks to be gold and seafoam. Yeah. So on the inside, the lining, the silk taffeta on the inside is kind of a russet color. Yeah, I can see how in this light, and that's because it's taffeta, you're getting the gold notes. So it's basically like a gold, it's gold and red, the taffeta, and I don't remember which is the warp and which is the weft, but it's gold and red. So yeah, you're probably getting the gold notes. So that is actually not a wrong statement now that I think about it. And yeah, it's like a blue sea foam, like a kind of an ice blue for the pattern, and then a slightly less icy blue for the satin background. Yeah, I got this silk damask, actually both of these. I got this taffeta and this silk damask from Fabric Guru on super sale. fabricguru.com. They are not a channel sponsor. I'm in no way affiliated with them other than having spent thousands, literally thousands of dollars in their fine shop buying discount interior design fabric, because Fabric Guru is a proper outlet in the traditional sense of they get the overage, the overstock, the discontinued bolts from the big interior design houses, so Ethan Allen, etc. And the quality of those fabrics, of those interior design upholstery fabrics, is extremely high. They're usually made in Italy, so the quality, the caliber is much higher than, your standard, what you might get, definitely what you would get in a Joann's or any kind of standard retail fabric store. Because this fabric was designed to, go on a piece of furniture like this and take a lot of wear and tear. So it's very dense, like this is super densely woven. And you can just feel it in the quality. And Fabric Guru takes a fabric that would normally cost $300 a yard if you were to buy it straight from Ethan Allen, just, outright. Or if you walked into a shop in Italy that sells silk damask. And, they end up selling it for $25 to $50 a yard. And then often they have 15% to 20% coupons. Well, not often, a couple of times a year if you sign up for the email specials. And so I ended up getting this fabric, and it was also discounted in and of itself, because when they get down below a certain number of yards, like below 10, 20 yards, I think it's no longer very useful. So they end up super discounting it. So I think I got this for $15 a yard, and it's 60 inches wide, which obviously is way wider than it would have been in the 15th century. In the 15th century, it would have been like 20 inches wide, 20 to 30 inches wide maximum, right? Not very wide at all. Yeah, it took forever for YouTube to display the chat window. I know, technology. You know, as I often say, I don't do medieval living history because of my love of modern technology. It's funny, we benefit so much from modern technology, but it can be so frustrating to attempt to get it to actually work. And unfortunately, for the next stage of this project, I'm really going to have to stand up, so I might have to do some shuffling here. But I do have a little bit of this seam I can finish, this bottom hem I can finish here. So yeah, if you have any questions or comments, want to tell me about any projects you're working on, drop them in the chat window. I am keeping an eye on it. Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, I'm preparing to attend a 2-week medieval recreationist event in Western Pennsylvania, of all places. That I'll be heading there on the end of July, and I'll be there for a couple of weeks, and I'll be teaching lots of 15th century dance classes, and I'll be leading 15th century salons and hosting balls and parties, and generally just living my best 15th century courtly life. So if you are attending Pennsic, our encampment's name is Belfiore, but we are actually this year sharing land with the Enchanted Grounds. So if you would like to seek me out there, either check the class schedule for dance classes or my balls and my Enchanted Picnic, or seek me out in our encampment. Just go to Enchanted Grounds and ask for the Contessa. They will point you in the right direction. I actually am planning on hosting a reception this year, a Creative Contessa reception. I'll put that out in the community posts and of course in all the various Creative Contessa social media channels. So keep your eye out if you are attending Pennsic. I really love meeting my followers and supporters and face to face and actually having good conversations. Because this is great. At least we can do this, but it's better to do it in person. Okay, lots of comments. What are we making with this shiny fabric? Oh, this nice shiny fabric. So this beautiful resplendent fabric, this is a giornea. This is a 15th century overgarment worn by men and women. Women wore it, by this period, this is the 1480s. At this point, women are wearing it long, it's dragging on the ground, and the men's version is very short indeed. And I will, once I'm just almost done with this bottom seam, I will stand up and show it to you. It has a long train. It's open on the sides. Some people might call it, I've heard it called a tabard dress, which is so wrong on so many levels, but that's okay. Whatever it takes to recognize a garment. And they were, some of the most expensive garments in the inventories are giornee and choppe, the overgarments, because the undergown, the gamora or the cotta, was a less opulent layer, because that layer was generally, well, for the gamora, was never meant to be seen out of doors by the general public. That was kind of like the thing ladies wore around the house in Florence. A cotta could be worn outside because it was more opulent and therefore acceptable to be worn without a top layer in the summer, for instance. But really, the giornee and the choppe are sort of the most splendid fashion in this in Florence. They are the most expensive, and the earlier ones are covered in jewels and gold and silver embroidery. But it seems that in the 1480s, they relied more on just fine fabric rather than the ornamentation on the giornea. It's so cool to see you live. Well, thank you. For those who don't know, with my patrons and my YouTube channel members, I actually do a Zoom chat where I can see your face. So that's one of the perks of being a patron on Patreon or a YouTube channel member, is that we actually then can really interact, and you can show me your projects, I can give you feedback, that sort of thing. This, obviously, you can see me, but I can't really see you. Oh yes, I the saga of Runolfr. Yep. Runolfr, are you going to be at Pennsic this year or not? It would be really cool. I think this year Pennsic, for those who don't know, Pennsic is an annual event that's been happening for over 50 years. Last year was the 50th year celebration, and it was, I think, 12 or 13,000 people attended. It was honestly too big. I'm kind of hoping it is a smaller event this year. I will openly admit, because we were really squeezed in last year. So I apologize that the second camera didn't work out this time. I will be better prepared now that I understand, now that I realize the flaws of this other phone that I have, which is that it will not turn the sound off. So I was hearing myself talk back at myself, and that was distracting to say the least. And also probably my microphone would have picked up my voice coming back at me, and then there just would have been a horrible feedback loop. Okay. Okay, well, I'm out of thread there, but that's okay. I will go and touch that up. So let me stand up and show you what we've got here. Oh, you won't be at Pennsic because you you did the tour. You did the tour of Europe, except the tour doesn't usually include England back in the 19th century because it was the English making the grand tour, but very good for you. It is kind of a shame that in the United States, it's such an uncivilized country that you get so little paid time off. It's like when I was living and working in Germany, I got 8 weeks off a year paid. And that did not include sick time. Okay. Let me see if I stand back here. Then I can show you the Jordanea. So this is the back. It's the back. So this is where it comes to the ground at the side. So everything lower than that is train. And this is the front. And there is no train in the front. It goes just to the ground in the front, and the V is open so that it hits you lower so that you can actually see the lacing of the Gomorra or the Cota. So you see that if you start looking in the frescoes from Florence in the second half of the 15th century, especially the frescoes in the Cappella Sassetti at Santa Trinita in Florence, or in the Cappella Tornabuoni in Santa Maria Novella, also known as the Cappella Maggiore, because it is basically in the center of the church of the basilica, and it really does dominate the space. And if you ever get a chance to go into Santa Maria Novella and go and check out the Cappella Maggiore, you will be shocked at how massive these frescoes actually are, because you only see them in art books normally, and you will be doubly shocked by how high up they are. You literally have to give yourself a crick in the neck to even make eye contact with them. So yeah. Let me see. Tennessee Ambassadors of Music Tour. High school kids playing concerts in various European cities. Oh yeah. Yeah, that's a different kind. That's not very much of a vacation. That sounds stressful and like lots of work if you were one of the people shepherding those students around. Okay, so now I'm actually going to hang this up here on my hand embroidered silk folding screen that I bought for a really crazy, crazy deal at a Korean junk slash antique store, or junk slash antique store here in Daegu. This is all hand done silk on silk. It's silk needle painting, and this is on a silk background, and it's got beautiful calligraphy on the back for the various ancestral ceremonies throughout the year. Yeah, I was so excited to find this piece. It's in nearly pristine condition. And we only paid, and it's got this gorgeous teak frame. It's the whole thing is just this masterful work of art, and we got it for $200 because apparently young Koreans don't want Korean things anymore. They want Western things. So that's good for me, because that means things like this go for not very much money, but it's kind of sad. Oh, little baby. Okay, well, I'll show you all the little baby because she deserves to be woken up. This is our little rescue kitten. So if you hear about any other trauma involving clothing or my person and the rescue kitten, this is she. Oh, she's purring. For those who who really just want to also follow my kitties exploits, we now have a Kitties of the Palace channel, so you can watch their interactions there. Okay, little baby, go back to sleep. Okay, so now I'm at the stage with this where I'm actually going to baste this bottom, oh, out of camera. I'm going to baste this bottom edge, and then I will be pinning on this band, and then basting that on and attaching it. So the reason that I want to baste this together first is because I want these two layers to act as one. They should be one layer together. And you can see there are a couple of spots where you know, the silk is a little bit longer than the shell, and that's fine. I'll handle that now that we've got it together. And you can also see I have dragged this thing all over the world. I started this 5 years ago, and it was actually nearly done 4 years ago. And then other projects got in the way. And I kept taking it with me almost everywhere I went when I traveled, thinking, oh, well, I'll break it out and I'll work on it on this trip. And instead of that actually happening, the lining on the back just ended up wearing away. So you can see that fringe. While that might look decorative, that's not intentional. That's just where you know, like an inch of the fabric has basically come unwoven from all of the jostling about. So you can definitely see, you know, the jostling did nothing to this quality silk damask. It's pretty much just fine. There's only a few hanging threads, whereas the taffeta that's lining it is definitely of a less dense weave and resisted that much less. Also, at some point, my Roomba vacuum cleaner got a hold of the train, and that's also another reason that so much of it is now missing. It literally grabbed the weft threads and pulled them out and wound them up. So apparently both my biological pets and my mechanical pets damaged my clothing. That's great. Welcome to my household. Yeah, this screen is really beautiful. It's an 8-panel screen, so I really love it. Yeah, the kitty's pretty cute. Show the kitty every video for extra likes. Yeah, so just so you know, at the end of all of my full-length videos, there is always a moment of feline felicity. Yeah, show the kitty in every video because that's how the internet works. Yeah. My kitty channel is growing at a way faster rate than my Travels with the Contessa channel. My kitty channel, I'm literally just throwing up basically unedited shorts every day and not really doing much with it. My travel channel, I curate the material, I script the vlogs, I spend, you know, dozens of hours editing, and of course, not to mention all the time filming. And, you know, I've not even yet hit 1,000 subscribers on that, but I'm confident the kitty channel is going to hit 1,000 subscribers in 2 months. It's just not fair. Okay, so let's see if this is tall enough for me to go ahead and pin this together. So this has been hanging. This garment has been hanging basically for most of the last 5 years. So, and I say that on purpose because when you have 2 layers for a dress or skirt, anything with 2 layers, a robe, you know, hanbok, tima, whatever. And those 2 layers are meant to be connected in some way and function as one. You want to hang them for at least a couple of days, but longer is better, and let any bias stretch happen, any stretching that's going to happen from gravity happen before you actually attach the 2 layers together. And, you know, depending on your fabric, it will stretch more or less. The looser the weave, the more stretch there will be. The tighter the weave, the less stretch there will be. And especially when you've got 2 layers whose weave is different. You know, this is a damask, right? It's a satin damask, and this is a taffeta. So completely different weave, right? And this is obviously much, much tighter because of the brocading, because of this patterning. So there's almost no stretch in this layer. This layer, there's a little bit more bias stretch, but even still, it's not like linen where you have a relatively loosish weave. But still, any stretch that has happened, is going to happen, has happened at this point. That's the advantage of dragging my feet on this project for 5 years. But I'm determined, absolutely determined. I will be wearing this at this Pennsic, for certain. And I'm confident some of you are shaking your heads or grimacing because Pennsic is an outdoor event, and wondering what will become of this beautiful light-colored silk damask. But, you know, that's why they invented that's why they invented laundresses. So what projects is everyone working on? Does anyone else have anything currently ongoing? Let's see, what other ongoing projects do I have? I have this, obviously. I have finished the Gamora, but it needs a couple of post adjustments now that I've worn it, the pink Gamora. The vlog on that will be coming out today. Today my time, so middle of the night your time, I guess. Actually, it's already out for my channel members. So the channel members can already see the next 2 installments, I think, in the vlog, the pink Gamora vlog, and my Patreon members as well. Just hasn't gone out for regular release yet. And so I'll need to actually take a tuck in the front of that, the skirts of that dress, because it's just a touch too long. It should go to the ground, but it goes a little bit past that. And in 15th century Florence, that's just not how Gamora were cut. They go to the ground, and with good reason. It's supposed to be the practical gown you just wear going up and down the stairs all day in your palazzo. And having worn 15th century clothes in a 15th century palazzo and gone up and down the stairs, I can tell you how annoying it would be if I had to really super hike up my skirts to go up and down those stairs. So, let's see. Ooh, one person, Alex, chimes in. I got a looming machine and I make a lot of hats, but I live in Texas, so not selling well. Oh, what kind of hats do you make? Hats are wonderful. Everyone should have hats. Ooh, a Hydra sweater. That's pretty cool. I'm a real hat person, for those who don't know. I love hats. I think they are super neat. I wear a hat every time I leave the house, basically. In the winter, it's a more practical matter of keeping my head warm. In the summer, it's a practical matter of keeping the sun off of my fair skin. But I also think it's a stylish look. I think everyone should wear hats. Hats forever. Let's see, what other projects do I have? I also another project that's been ongoing since last year is to add a fur guard to the bottom of my pink Burgundian gown. I already added a collar, and the cuffs, actually, I need to just attach the cuffs. Last year I got them done enough to just put them on and pin them, but I think I'd actually like to attach them. And yeah, the fur guard is pretty, it's like 10 meters for 7 meters of fur that I need to prepare to attach to the bottom of the gown, and then actually attach it to the bottom of the gown. I am not immensely optimistic that will happen by Pennsic, or even at Pennsic, because at Pennsic we've decided, one of my apprentices and I, that we will be preparing, reconstructing another Burgundian gown that I have that I made for my coronation 15 years ago. It's yellow silk with hand appliqued black silk dragons. And the fit was entirely wrong in the shoulders and the sleeve cap. So we need to basically reconstruct it. But because of the nature of the collar on this gown, it's going to be really complicated because it's a turn-back collar of the sort of collars that you might see modernly on a business suit. And so I've already reconstructed once. That's the pink gown that got reconstructed. So I know how frustrating and lengthy the reconstruction process is, but I'm going to have my professional tailor apprentice there to help me. And as some of you heard me say last night, she's an actual professional, whereas I'm a dilettante professional. So that will be nice, having her assistance. And hopefully, maybe I'll actually get to wear that gown at Pennsic. That gown has not been seen by anyone but me and the intimate members of my household in my closet for 15 years almost, 14 and a half years anyway. I don't know where the time has gone. It's really kind of crazy. Now, the somewhat annoying thing about what I'm doing now is I already did this before, but because I did it so long ago, all those pins came out from hauling it from pillar to post. So, yeah, here we go. This is what happens when you delay your projects. Oof, that is really ugly under there. Definitely, obviously, I'm just gonna trim this down. I'm not going to even bother losing an inch off of a train that's already 4 feet long. It's okay. It will be fine. Oh, so let's see, Lucrezia, she's making her hem banding. Getting the hem banding on her Burgundian gown. Oh, that's nice. Fixing the collar, yeah. The collar, it's always the collar, that gown. It really is. It'll be exciting, Lucrezia, for you to actually have a overgown to wear this Pennsic. We will be quite a set, you and I. So Alex, you do crocheting and knitting? That's my grandmother taught me to crochet when I was 9. It's actually probably my grandmother's fault that I'm crafty, although one might say creativity is probably in my family's blood because we're all kind of on my father's side of the family anyway, all crafty and creative. My father expresses his creativity through the culinary arts and song. My grandfather wove a carpet. And it is a beautiful carpet. It is beautiful. It was, I'm pretty certain it was meant to be a Muslim prayer rug, actually. Um, the thing he wasn't able to do though, he didn't finish it. It's almost done. Just someone needs to cut the loops. And he actually, in his will, he said it goes to whomever will be willing to actually finish it and cut the loops. And so my father has it. My father has not cut the loops. So maybe I'll be the one who cuts the loops, I guess, at this point. So my grandfather was crafty, my aunts were crafty, so it's in my blood, I guess. And my grandmother recognized my craftiness at an early age and taught me how to crochet. But funnily enough, I vaguely remember, I mean, I think I could probably do it if I picked up a crochet hook and some thread or yarn, but I didn't keep up with it. I decided to go on to I preferred turning fabric into things. And then, I decided I wanted to focus on medieval arts. So crocheting, I have not seen any evidence of crocheting with a hook. Because the thing that makes crocheting is the fact that there's a hook. The crochet is hook in French, right? So it's, in essence, it's kind of like a form of, it's like taking needle binding to the next level. But on the other hand, I'm immortal. I have a limited lifespan, so I can't really do everything. And so I have to pick and choose what things I'm going to pursue. Yeah, I wish I had basted this a long time ago, but I didn't. I just put pins in preparation for basting, and then I traveled, and then all the pins came out. So, yeah, Lucrezia says when she travels, she thread marks hems, which is a great idea. Yeah, if you have gems that need to be married. Oh, hems that need to be married. Maybe that should have been instead of gems. Yeah, and that's exactly why I'm pinning it now so that I can actually do the basting. So I wish I had done any of that before I started traveling around, but I didn't because I put the pins in and thought, oh well, I guess I'll get to the basting on the road, and that didn't even happen. So there it is. I'm paying the penalty for yielding to my innere Schweinehund, my inner pig dog, as they say in German, by having to redo the work now. So it is what it is. Okay, I'm going to pull out the basting stitches in the front here. Yeah, the Gamora, I'm very, the comment was, I'm sure the Gamora is going to be gorgeous. I actually show pictures in the vlog that's coming out. I'm actually very, very happy with how the Gamora turned out. It fits very nicely. It's very comfortable. It looks nice. I'm going to be test piloting it at Pennsic for wool wear because I have a wool kirtle that I often wear at Pennsic and is perfectly comfortable. And so I'll be interested to see to wear my wool Gamora, and I'm pretty confident I'm going to find that I'm equally comfortable in it. There's this weird bias against wool, that wool is just hot and you can't wear wool in hot weather. Well, not all wools are the same. Obviously, you shouldn't wear boiled wool in the dead of summer when it's fully humid and, you know, temperatures are in the, 30s or 90s, depending on your scale, and humidity is through the roof, right? But there's plenty of lightweight wools that are very comfortable in those temperatures. Wool actually breathes very nicely. And it's an insulator. So, but it insulates in both directions, right? It keeps the sun off of your skin and it breathes. And I've never had any problem wearing a lighter weight wool in even in Thailand. In fact, I would be more likely to wear wool in Thailand than I would wear silk in Thailand. Because I've done that. I have worn wool in Thailand, attending medievalist events in Thailand. So, yeah, been there, done that. I think when people think of wool, they think of the kind of wool out of which, heavy winter coats are made. And yeah, definitely don't wear that in a hot climate. You will probably die of heat stroke. Lucrezia, one of my apprentices, says that she has a beautiful Italian gown that has been in the work for 8 years and is in the embroidery frame for the bodice. Oh, that's a shame. That's 8 years and it's still in the embroidery frame for the bodice. Oof, yeah. Yeah, I'm getting the urges to do a Crivelli gown. For those who don't know, Crivelli is a very talented artist from 15th century Italy. You will, if I showed you some of his works, you would say, oh yes, probably. You'll say, oh yes, I've seen that, even if you don't know him. He has some very famous depictions of Mary Magdalene, for example. And she's, in one of them, she is wearing a stunning, stunning gown that is just covered in gold embroidery. And it's almost like a piece of armor. It's so gorgeous. And I recently found several inventory expense accounts detailing bodices that would look exactly like that. And this is what I always tell people: never trust art as a reference. Art was not a replacement for, it was art in the Middle Ages and Renaissance was not just the analog version of a camera, right? It there was symbolism. There was symbolism to the pieces. There were conventions that were followed that had nothing to do with what people were actually wearing. So you really have to understand art and its context in order to be able to interpret what is clothing and what is fantastical and what's legendary, and if that piece of clothing is actually supposed to be telling a story rather than representing something a real person wore at the time. So I never trust art on its own. Now, when art aligns with descriptions in chronicles, with contemporary chronicles, with inventory accounts, with expense accounts, with the listings of materials that have been ordered to make a garment, then I say you can use art to help you visualize the written word. But for me, I have to have both before I really trust it. If I'm going for a historical garment, now if I'm just making something because I want to make something, who cares? But if I'm talking about recreating a historical garment that I, for the purposes of being historically authentic, then I want to make sure it's not just a piece of art I have in front of my eyes, but also written documentation to inform that piece of artwork. Yeah. So I recently found an expense account. Actually, it's uh, was not an expense account. It was a listing of the materials that went into the making of a garment, of a cotta, which is the fancier version of the gamora. And it basically, what was described would be exactly, would definitely look like this Crivelli's Mary Magdalene, right? So I'm kind of excited to make a cotta instead of a gamore, because for the most part I've been making gamore. Now I do have a couple of I have a couple of silk ones, gamore, that I've made, but they were always just plain silk. And then I added an embroidered sleeve patch applique on one of them to make it a little fancier. But, even though it is a silk taffeta, it might count as a cotta, but it's not really splendid, like covered in just stunning embroidery. So, an applique. So I'm kind of excited to make something a little bit of a fancier, more decorative, more ornate garment for my next 15th century Italian project. And I was saying last night in last night's, or the earlier sip and stitch that I did to try to catch all the time zones, that I am thinking about doing a 1450 ensemble for a couple of reasons. One, I actually like how massive those garments are. They're fitted in the bodice, but they are also just massive trains and beautiful, huge sleeves. Like, talk about filling space. And I'm the kind of lady who likes to fill space, if you know what I mean. And also because the dances that I reconstruct they all date basically to the 1450s in their origin, most of them, and or earlier. And so the dances were actually originally designed for the clothing from the 1440s, 1450s. And so I feel like that will allow me to get more intimately acquainted with those dances, to understand the dances even better by wearing clothing that's even closer to the time when those dances were created. And I have this idea that because dances evolved over time, and we actually have enough sources for 15th century dance that we can actually see the evolution of some dances over the decades, and how the footwork changes and in some ways becomes more ornate or more staid or more energetic, depending. And so my idea is, if I can get, like, if I have this, what I call the 15th century decade project, where I do an ensemble from each decade, and then I reconstruct the dance for the source from that decade, the same dance for each decade, and dance each version in each ensemble going forward in time, and then really think about how they feel different and how that those things work synergistically together. So yeah. Comment is, I can see you in pearls in the Giornea. Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of excited about the prospect of making something a little fancier. One of the good things about having made the wool gamora is that it allowed me to experiment with my recent findings from examining the very few extant garments we have from 15th century Italy, and apply the learnings and experiment with my ideas about applying those techniques. And so now I feel much more confident going forward and applying that to significantly more expensive fabric. And significantly less forgiving fabric, because wool is an extremely forgiving fabric. If you poke holes in wool with needles and pins and you undo your stitches, you can just smooth those holes away. But there are, fabrics like this, if you poke a hole in this with a pin or a needle, it's so tightly woven that it doesn't really go away. It just kind of stays for the most part. So you need to be more judicious in your application of pointy metal objects on fabrics like this than you do on a wool, for instance. So it was good to, use the wool gamora, as a kind of a laboratory for my historical sartorial experimentations, and to come to some conclusions, get some lessons learned, and then apply that going forward. Yeah. Your comment is the dance through history is brill. Yeah, I really hope, the problem with the idea that I suggested is that when you hand sew everything the way I do, everything takes a lot longer. Um, and yeah, so I love the idea, and maybe if I actually set myself a deadline, that might actually get me to focus and push myself through even my low energy periods to work on the garments and actually get it done in, say, a year. It took me a year and a half to finish the pink wool gamora. I mean, I was doing other things at the time. It's not like I was just doing that. There were other projects. There was the silk velvet hood for my not a hennin. There was the belt, the big beautiful Burgundian belt. There were lots of repairs that needed to be made to many of my garments because when you actually wear medieval clothes, like medieval people did, in like sort of a day in, day out thing for weeks on end. And when you live as rigorous a lifestyle as I do, then seams bust and things wear away and need to be patched and repaired. And of course, all those repairs were also hand done. So, there were lots of things happening around that, but still, the other thing I realized, and I mentioned this in last night's Sip and Stitch, and I apologize to anyone who was there last night or in the earlier one and is hearing this again, but I, just like I hand sew everything, I also hand make most of my food, by which means I don't consume processed foods for the most part. And so I culture my own dairy, I do my own sourdough bread from my own self-cultured sourdough starter. I make jams and preserves and bone stock and lard and rendered pig fat and all that all myself. And I cook everything from scratch. And I realized as I was trying to figure out why my productivity on my textile arts is not higher, I realized that when you spend several hours a day just handling culinary matters, you don't necessarily have a lot of time left over for sewing. So yeah, I realized that the friends I have who have really high outputs, they order takeout a lot. So yeah, there is that. Let me check the chat window. Deadlines. Haha. Yeah, that's probably where we go. Were you able to see the Medici exhibit at the Met? No, the 16th century Medici exhibit? No. I was not able to get there in time for that. It did not align with any of my East Coast bound trips. I did manage to see the Last Night exhibit twice back in 2019, and that was amazing because they actually had arming garments and armor, like proper, really complex helmet liners and whatnot from the 15th century in addition to the 15th century armor. But I wasn't able to get there for the Medici exhibit. Yeah, I know the Pisa gown was on display there. I was saying last night, actually, and I think some of other of Eleonora de Toledo's stuff was there. I was saying that last night, though, earlier to this, that I'm seriously thinking about leading a Creative Contessa extant garment tour of Europe and doing it in sections. So literally the purpose is to tour around and enjoy the beauty of the historic sites and the culture and culinary delights of each country, but also do it while visiting the extant garments that are on display in various museums and churches, and seeing if I can arrange actually like hands-on viewing of some of them. So, in Italy, there's a series of extant garments, up at the Pisa, the Royal Museum in Pisa, there's the Pisa gown, of course, what we call the Pisa gown, which was probably one of Leonor de Toledo's a gown for one of her ladies in waiting, that beautiful red silk velvet gown. I want to go to the monastery where or I think it's her house actually, where Osana Andreazzi's Gamora is on display, and see if they probably won't let us touch it because it looks pretty delicate. But at least we'll be able to like really put our faces up to it and look closely at all of those important details. And then go down to the monastery in Faloni, where Diego di Cavaniglia's garments are on display, the reconstruction and the originals, and see if they'll let us, depending on how delicate they are, see if they'll let us examine them up close and personal. In Naples, of course, in the San Domenico, there is a San Domenico Maggiore. They have a large, well, for 15th and early 16th century garments, a large collection of extant garments from the royal tombs of the Aragonese royal family. And they're actually in drawers, and you can literally just pull them out and look at it through glass, but in drawers that you can just pull out and look at. And, you know, there's a couple of pairs of hosen, and there's some shirts, and there's a couple of dresses, and a bodice that's not really quite complete, but anyway, the details on the stitching are very fascinating. So anyway, this is what I'm thinking of doing an extant medieval garments tour of each respective country. Tour of Italy, tour of Spain, see what Greece might have that I just haven't heard about. Germany has a bunch of extant garments in very odd and unexpected places, especially cathedral and church treasuries. France, for certain, holy goodness, France. You know, getting down to the Musée des Tissus in Lyon, where Charles de Blois' pourpoint is on display. Yeah, so, and of course the Cluny has some extant textiles, and again, in churches kind of all over France, there are medieval extant garments just kind of hanging out there waiting for someone to come and look at them. So that's my thought, is to do this as a creative Contessa function. I will arrange the itinerary, I'll arrange the transport, food will be on each individual person, but I'll arrange the lodgings, and the museum itineraries, and kind of bundle it into a package. So I'm thinking of doing that because I want to do it anyway for me. And so why not take people along with me for the ride, is a thought I'm having about that. Yeah. Oh, Lucrezia says she saw the Pisa gown in person when it was on exhibit in Memphis. Memphis, of all places. That's great. I cried a bit, enjoy it, seeing it. Oh, yeah. Oh, the looms at the workshops in Venice that are the oldest in the world. Yeah, yeah. So that would definitely be part of it too. We would definitely, because also in Florence, there's a workshop there that also has some of the oldest operating looms in the world. Yeah, Lucrezia was just saying, and go to Venice to see some of the oldest still operating looms in the world at those fabric shops. Yeah, definitely that would be part of it. And getting, you know, basically a kind of intro to the weaving process on some of these amazing silk damasks and velvets. Yeah, maybe some of you may have seen, there's been a couple of documentaries that have gone out about these looms, these weaving shops in Italy that are still operating some damned old looms and doing things still the old way and producing some of the most expensive and finest fabrics in the world. So yeah, we would definitely, that would be part of the tour as well, would be hitting some of the traditional textile workers that happen to still be operating in the respective places. Where was I? Italy. Yeah, I know I just said Italy, but I was in a village, a beautiful medieval, fortified city on a hill, and the local living history group has set up there they have reconstructed a 14th, I think they do 14th century. It was 14th century, 14th, early 15th century. They had set up, reconstructed a loom based on the illuminations depicting looms from that era for weaving silk. And they actually have all the stages set up, and they're actually weaving silk in the 14th century, early 15th century style. I actually did a walking tour of that medieval village set to beautiful music. It's on my Creative Contessa channel. And the name of that village it's also Perugino also has a very beautiful fresco in this village, in the chapel, in the chapter house of a chapel of this village, which was unexpected. The village's name is Oh, for God's sake. Sorry, the word is completely gone. The only word in my head right now is Pisa, and it is definitely not Pisa. It is. Mm. Anyway, I'd probably include a stop there. It's in Umbria, or it's kind of like at the interstitial space between Umbria and Perugia. So, but I think it's technically in Umbria. Oh, the Fortuny Museum too. It's interesting. I actually don't know what the Fortuny Museum is. That is something I have not heard of. Visiting also the Fortuny Museum on the tour. I have not actually heard of that. So yeah, if you're potentially interested in participating in that sort of tour, I guess let me know in the comments, and I guess keep your eye open because I will definitely be advertising it once I figure out how feasible my vision actually is and what I can actually offer instead of what I imagine I can offer on such a trip. I mean, for certain, what will definitely be doable is to go to those places and see the things in the cases, right? You can do that. Anyone can do that. The part that I'd have to really look into is whether I can get in good with the curators and get a more hands-on first-person view of any of the items. And as I said, many of these items are so delicate, probably not. On the other hand, I have been in museums, in the archive, in the storage areas of museums, and actually handled 15th century clothing and armor. So it is possible. That was actually at the um, Chicago Institute of Art, in case you're wondering, uh, was the most recent example of that. Let's see. My hotel was right next to Fortuny, and it was closed at that time of year. Aw, it's very frustrating when you go to a place thinking that you're going to get to go to a museum or a specific site, and it's closed either for that time of year or what more happens more often in Italy, especially. It's closed because people are on strike, or it's having some kind of emergency renovations, or renovations that were supposed to only take X amount of time are now taking Y amount of time. Um, Yeah, and we would definitely, we would go in Florence, we would go to the Palazzo d'Avanzati, and I would reach out to them because those ladies really like me. We, when we were there last year, we went in our 1480s Florentine finery, and they were so excited to have us there. The ladies who staff the Palazzo d'Avanzati, and they showed us some parts of the museum the palace that normal visitors don't get to see, and that was really exciting. So maybe I can get in good and we can see some of the things that are not on display that are kind of in the storage area of the Palazzo d'Avanzati, which for those who don't know what the Palazzo d'Avanzati is, I have a video on it on my channel. Highly recommend. It's a fully restored 14th, 15th century palazzo, with all its beautiful frescoes, medieval 14th century frescoes on the inside. It has some medieval furniture. A lot of the furniture is more 16th century or slightly later. But for the most part, it is the way the palazzo would have been in the 14th and 15th century, complete with its super sophisticated internal water delivery system to allow water to be hauled up through buckets and a pulley system all the way to the kitchen, which is on the top floor. And yeah, the Palazzo d'Avanzati it's magical. Every time I go to Florence, I go there just because being in the space is just wonderful. And the last time we were there, we actually put on some music and danced Rostoboli Gioioso in one of the bedchambers. Yes, we did do that. That is a thing we did. So yeah, definitely would take a group to the Palazzo d'Avanzati. Because everyone gets so excited about, the palazzi like the Palazzo Medici, but actually the Palazzo Medici is immensely disappointing, Medici Riccardi, because it has been so modernized, and it is with the exception of the Cappella dei Maggi, it's not it's not very Renaissance, medieval or Renaissance. It's, you know, it actually functions. I think it's the town hall. It's the town where the town council meets now, which I think the Medici would approve in general because they kind of always viewed themselves, well, not always, but as of the 15th century, started viewing themselves as the de facto princes of the city and the powerhouse. And so having the city council meet there, that seems on brand for them. But yeah, it's definitely not, it doesn't, you don't really feel like you're stepping back in time with the exception of the Chapel of the Magi when you go to the Palazzo Medici. It's a little disappointing. But I mean, totally a first world problem to be able to say that. How many people say that a palazzo of one of the most powerful families in history is a little disappointing? Oh my God, I just heard it. I heard it, everyone. I heard it. You should look up Fortuny. Amazing and beautiful silk and silk velvet. They only just figured out how he did the pleating. So is Fortuny, I guess, a fashion designer then? I'm assuming from the way everyone is talking about this. I mean, I'm big into fashion in general. I respect a lot of the great fashion houses that actually produce beautiful works of sartorial art. I do not respect the kind of fashion designers that, you know, literally put their runway models in whatever trash that they can in order to just say that they are avant-garde. It's just like modern art. It's like art should be beautiful. I don't believe that a rock in the center of the floor counts as art, no matter how much meaning you might want to ascribe it. That doesn't make it art. That makes it a display or an installation, but not art. But that's my very inflexible opinion on the subject of modern art. If I go to a modern art gallery, it is strictly to mock the things on display out loud, by the way. In company with other people. Obviously, we go as a group and we group mock the art. But it's one thing if it's beautiful. And, you know, it doesn't even have to be a shape per se, but, you know, just colors beautifully presented on canvas. I can appreciate that. That's beautiful. But I went to a recent art exhibit in Busan for a contemporary Korean artist, and it was literally, and I'm not making that up, there were rocks just in each of the rooms, rocks, and there were blank canvases. And then there was occasionally a huge canvas with like a single tiny paint stroke on it. And there was, I was there with my Korean friends and I said, my cat could make more convincing art than this. It was, you know, the sign said, here is a blank canvas. And it was an immense canvas. This canvas probably cost $2,000 or $3,000. It was so huge, you know, completely gessoed and prepared. And the sign said that here the artist would like you to imagine the work of art that you would like to see. And I'm like, no, I want you to paint something and then I will appreciate it. I don't have to go to a museum to use my imagination. I can stay at home and use my imagination, which I do all the time. Ranting with the Contessa. Yeah, I hear it. It's okay. It's what happens when there isn't someone else in the room to moderate my stance on things. Oh, I hear the sirens. Someone did something naughty. I have to say, though, but the time I spend in Korea makes me appreciate just how safe it is here. You know, our 13-year-old son is visiting for the summer, and I have no problem. We're here in a city of 3 million, maybe 3 million people. I'm not certain what the population is, but it's multiple millions of people. And I have no problem letting him go out on his own, walk around at any time, day or night. I know he will be safe. Whereas, you know, when I'm in other places, even in Europe, I know I have to be wary. I have to keep an eye on any satchel I may have with me. I have to keep an eye on my pockets. I have to make sure, you know, no one is following me down alleys. You know, less so the following down alleys part in Europe, more the pickpocket thing is a problem in Europe these days. In America, though, whew, you've got to be like your own bodyguard. It's It's not great. I would not let my son go out and about this way in most American towns or cities. It's just not safe, but it's so safe here. So nice. The most dangerous thing is the drivers. Let me see. Did you see Wings of the Dove? Sandy Powell did costumes and found someone to do the Fortuny gowns. I have not seen Wings of the Dove. Why does that sound familiar? Hmm. Was that a play? Was Wings of the Dove a play? I actually don't usually get to express ignorance in these chats. This is great. Okay, you ladies are discussing something with which I'm utterly unfamiliar. That's wonderful. And I mean that. I'm not being sarcastic. It's nice to not to not know everything when people are talking. That sounds really braggadocious, and I don't mean it that way. I love learning things, I think is my point. I love being exposed to new things. One of the reasons I travel is because it's a great way to be exposed to new culture, new history, new experiences, and all of that is about learning. I've realized the common bond there in that is the learning. I love to learn. It's why I don't agree with the theory that immortality would lead to ennui, that you would eventually just grow bored of it all, a la Anne Rice vampires. I think that if you have a curious mind and a curious disposition, that it would be possible to live forever and to never get bored, because there's so many different things to learn across history, across time, going back, going forward. New languages, old languages, new discoveries. I wouldn't, there would be no ennui. There would be no boredom for me. Wouldn't happen. Getting to that fringy part. So I mentioned it in my earlier sip and stitch. For people who were there, I apologize for the repetition, but for the people who are just joining this one, I think you'll find this very interesting, and it will be also mentioned in one of the vlog that on which I'm currently working for the Pink Gamora. I found a ricordanza belonging to Marco Parente, a powerful Florentine family in the 1440s and 1450s. Well, they were powerful for longer than that. But anyway, Marco Parente was recording in his diary in 1447, and as a result of his engagement to Caterina Strozzi, he ordered a set of clothing for her. And specifically, he ordered the materials for that clothing, and sent those materials to the tailor to be put together. And he records this in his family memoir, because that's what the kinds of things that were recorded in diaries in the 15th century. Not feelings, not a thing, but the happenings of daily life were recorded. So births, deaths, business interactions, major purchases, things that were being made, things that were being sold, those were recorded in documents. Household purchases, everything. So ricordanze are an excellent source of information, especially for Florence, because they were big memoir keepers. And at all levels of society. I mean, obviously you had to be literate. So any level of society that included literacy, ricordanze were kept. And he records about ordering the materials and commissioning a giornea, a cotta, the fancier version of the camora, and a ghirlanda for Caterina. And he details pretty much all of the materials needed except for thread. Regular sewing thread is not mentioned in this order, interestingly, but decorative notions are. And he specifically mentions that for the cotta, he ordered 120 gilt rings for lacing the front of the cotta. And at first I thought, wow, that's a lot of rings. But this is what led me to decide I think I want to do a 1450s outfit. Then I went and looked at some portraiture from the 1440s and 1450s of ladies in cotte. Thankfully, they are wearing cotte, and you can see the front of the gown. And I looked closely and I realized, holy God, these lacing rings are placed right next to each other. No room between. I mean, literally just a budding. And then the lace literally just functions like sewing. Like you basically sew this thing shut in the front with lacing rings. You can barely even, if you have to look closely, and then you see this line of red that's going down the center of all the lacing rings, because when lacing rings are that close, I know because I have done this, they just kind of come together and just form a line. There's no back and forth in the lacing. It's just a straight line up and down. And I counted the number of rings that I could see in just what I could see of the picture, and I realized, yeah, 120 is about what you would need for an opening that goes to, the hips, if you're going to put them that close together. And thinking about it specifically for a cotta for a lady who is hopefully, I'm certain Marco was hoping, going to get pregnant very soon, you want to have a really long opening so that there's plenty of room to take it off over what will hopefully be a fecund belly. So that was an interesting finding. And then there also, in addition, there was like 50 smaller lacing rings, I think, for the sleeves, and actually specified larger rings for the front, smaller ones for the sleeves. So very interesting details in these ricordanze. And I actually have a set of ricordanze here. This set I ordered, La Memoria Familiare. It's part of a series. I'm going to see what other ricordanze they may have. These are the ricordanze of the Martelli family, specifically Ugolino di Niccolo Martelli. And it covers the period from 1433 to 1483, so about 50 years of his life. It doesn't, it only sometimes talks about clothing. Lots of other things are discussed. They're like supplies for the kitchen. So there's like a whole kitchen shopping list in here about a ridiculous quantity of eggs that he ordered and a equally ridiculous quantity of milk. But, they weren't shopping for just their, immediate family. A medieval or 15th century Florentine household could be 100 people, because you need all the staff. They all eat. You feed them as well, your dependents, your clients. So yeah, it's these ricordanze in many ways are often like opening a window into the past. They can also be sad sometimes because, of course, deaths are also mentioned, and, children die so often in this period. And you can even tell, I mean, I did say they don't talk about their feelings. They don't talk about feelings per se, but the way in which the recording of the death of the death of a child is recorded, you can often feel the sorrow in the words, even though it's not explicitly stated. So it's a window into the past. That window can be uplifting or not, depending. Yeah, let me check the chat. Let's see. Oh, Helena Bonham Carter movie. Okay. I was able to go to the Cluny 30 years ago. What I remember most was how small the unicorn tapestries were. Yeah. Yeah, the unicorn tapestries are, yeah, and so the thing about the tapestries in general were commissioned for a specific room. And you commissioned a suite of tapestries. It's called a chamber of tapestries, a chambre, because, and that's how they appear in the inventories from France, is a chambre of tapestries. And that means because it was designed for a room, and it was designed to fit around the doors and the windows and the fireplace of that room. And so that's why tapestries often have an odd shape. You're like, why is that one rectangular? Why is that one vertical? Why is that one horizontal? Why is that one square? That's because they were designed to cover the entirety of the walls of that room, but around whatever objects were taking up wall space. So yeah, that's why the unicorn the lady, la dame à la licorne they're not huge, because they were designed for a room. And that's why you will notice that some tapestries are immense, because they were designed for a specific space. If you go in America, if you want to see some of the hugest 15th and 16th century tapestries in the world, go to Biltmore in Asheville, because the Vanderbilts bought all sorts, like many of the robber barons of that era, bought all sorts of super beautiful, expensive, and rare medieval objets d'art. including tapestries and furniture and armor, um, altarpieces, etc. And when Cornelius built Biltmore, he designed the Great Hall, the Great Gallery, specifically to fit these tapestries that he already had in his collection. And these tapestries are absolutely huge. I think they were originally woven to go in one of the Loire Valley chateaux, actually Chambord maybe, which is also really big on the inside, has really large spaces. So yeah, if you want to, you can, the series he has there, I think, is the Trojan War. I think it's the Trojan War. It's an immense, there's some really immense tapestries. So yeah, thank you, robber barons. This is how, the only way that most Americans get exposed to medieval material culture is thanks to the purchases of Carnegie and Rockefeller and Vanderbilt and Walters. And yeah, in America, a sure way to know if a city had their own robber barons is to look at the city's museum collection. If the museum collection has medieval artwork, there were robber barons in that city. Cleveland, Boston, Los Angeles, the Gettys, San Francisco, you know, the robber barons did a lot of harm to the United States, and I do mean a lot, but at least they brought us medieval art. And in some cases, that's the only reason that medieval art survived to this day, because World Wars I and II were horrific for the art history record. Really, really horrific. Let's see, checking the chat. I wish I could have gone back to the Sistine Chapel when they were displayed, when they displayed the tapestries that were made for it. Oh, and Lucrezia says, the Biltmore tapestries are so beautiful. Oh, and the library ceiling, yeah. So Lucrezia lives in the Carolinas, so Biltmore is not that far from where she lives. My mother and stepfather live in Asheville, so whenever I visit them, I can go to Biltmore and see them, but the cost of entry at Biltmore has become prohibitive. It's like $80 or something ridiculous just to go in and walk around. It's absolutely untenable. It's an amazing mansion if you want to see how the really rich, the ridiculously ultra rich lived at the end of the 19th century. I mean, it's a neo-Renaissance chateau that makes real chateau look small by comparison. Everything in it is oversized and immense and over Gothicized, and it's fascinating to see, the swimming pool with its 20 changing rooms and the kitchen complex in the basement with its like 5 actual cooking kitchens and 20 pantries and 10 preparation areas, right? To imagine this household running with a full staff. But I'm not certain it's $80 worth of fascinating. And I'm not certain the tapestries are worth $80 to go and see. uh, Let me see. I used to be a season pass holder. The cost has doubled since COVID for the day entry. Yeah, exactly. So Lucrezia, my mother and stepfather noted the same thing. They used to be season pass holders too, but since COVID, they've doubled the price for everything, and it makes it unappealing utterly. Like, okay, it's nice to see how the ultra rich once lived, but that's okay. Not worth that. I was about to. Oh, the Sistine Chapel. Travel tip for the Sistine Chapel. The Vatican Museum once a month offers Friday night at the museum. You have to buy the tickets in advance. They're not expensive. You just have to do it in advance online. And then it is a limited viewing. So it's limited to relatively few tickets. And so it's at night, the lights are on, but the windows are dark, and there's way fewer people. And it is the best way to see the Sistine Chapel. It was so quiet. There was like 10 other people in the Sistine Chapel with me. And so you're able to actually sit on the benches on the sideline, the stone benches that were put there for, for priests and monks during chapter. And you can sit there and just breathe in the space and just admire the majesty of this space. And I'm going to tell you, I mean, yeah, I'm about to say something heretical, so brace yourself. Michelangelo's ceiling frescoes, they're nice. They're not my favorite part of the Sistine Chapel. My favorite part of the Sistine Chapel are Ghirlandaio's frescoes, which are lower and much more easier to appreciate. Those are a beautiful piece of 15th century art that never get talked about. I didn't even know Ghirlandaio had frescoes in the Sistine Chapel until I went to the Sistine Chapel. And I've been studying art history for decades. I've been looking through art books for decades. I took 2 art history courses in college. No one talked about Ghirlandaio's frescoes in the Sistine Chapel. It's all Michelangelo, 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 right? I'm not a big fan of 16th century style art. It's just not my style. It's too bombastic. It's too grandiose. It's almost too dynamic. It's distracting to me. It's probably the same reason I don't like watching anime, actually. And I'm not comparing Michelangelo to anime, but sort of some of the characteristics are there. and other controversial things I have said. Ghirlandaio's works, though, I love his style. I love his palette. I love the way he represents things. That really is a style, artistic style that appeals. So I love going into the Sistine Chapel and looking at Ghirlandaio's fresco cycle. That is right above the wainscoting, right above the wooden wainscoting. If you just look just a little bit up, there's his frescoes. So Friday night at the Vatican, go and appreciate Ghirlandaio's works, and I guess you can look at Michelangelo's ceiling thing too if you really want to. Oh, Lucrezia comments about Biltmore. They just had Chihuly, which they had Chihuly like 4 years ago. I know because I went and they had all of his stuff set up throughout the mansion and in the garden. And it did. I'm not, like I said, not usually a fan of modern art. And Chihuly is definitely a modern glass artist. But I will say that in the garden, it definitely made the garden more beautiful because a lot of his glass sculptures kind of look like scary flowers from another planet. So it actually made the gardens at Biltmore, it did add some beautiful color and shape to them. I will admit, I did appreciate that. I was not such a fan of the Chihuly glass in Biltmore because it is completely at odds with the Neo-Renaissance, Neo-Gothic style of that chateau. I'm not a big fan of combining medieval and modern just to prove that the medieval is somehow relevant because it's been connected to a modern thing. I think medieval things are relevant because they're part of our history. You don't need to modernize them to make them more relevant. Yeah, but my mother says I was born an old woman, so I have lots of opinions that aren't normally held by people in my age category. Let's see. My favorite part of the Sistine Chapel are the Botticelli and the Ghirlandaios. Yep. Same here. Oh, and Botticelli's work as well. Yep. Those. I'm. Thank you, Susan, for sharing in my view of the Sistine Chapel. And I do get frustrated how those great 15th century artists, their work is never mentioned in any real way in connection with the Sistine Chapel. It's all about the ceiling frescoes by Michelangelo, whose work, by the way, rests solidly on the shoulders of artists like Ghirlandaio and Botticelli. Now, I'm a much bigger fan of Ghirlandaio and Botticelli's style in general, not just because the 15th century is my preferred time. The reason the 15th century is my preferred time is because that aesthetic appeals to me. The aesthetic doesn't appeal to me because it's 15th century, if that makes sense. Yeah, I ended up naturally gravitating towards the 15th century because that's just what felt most comfortable to me. So, okay, well, this is now all basted. And you're probably thinking to yourself, wow, it took you all that time just to baste it, but this is like a 3 or 4 meter swoop of fabric here. It's a pretty extensive hemline. So yeah. Let me see. Lucrezia says, I got to see the Vatican Museum and Sistine Chapel with just my tour group after hours since we were on an Adventure by Disney tour. Breathtaking. Yeah, I cried like a baby because I'd studied it all 4 years. Yeah. Yeah, the nighttime at the Vatican Museum is the best way to see it. I have never gone during the day. I will never go during the day. I am hugely unfond of crowds, which is why it keeps me from doing certain things, because I actually get claustrophobic in a crowd. And crowded museums just frustrate the hell out of me, because it's very hard to appreciate some of these works with the cacophony and bustle of lots of people. And of course, if you go to the Vatican at night, then you actually get into some of the 15th century papal chambers. You know, there's something probably very few people appreciate, but I do. In the Julius suite of rooms, there is a molded leather ceiling. The ceiling is sculpted out of molded leather, and then the leather has been gilt. And just the thought of making an entire ceiling out of molded leather and then gilding it, it's what a fascinating application for leather. And it's a stunning set of ceilings. I always admonish people when they travel to look up. Always remember to look up. And sometimes, I mean, literally bend your neck at a 95-degree angle to your body and stare at the ceiling, because a lot of the most beautiful pieces of historical buildings are above your head. It's not the walls, it's the thing straight above you. So always remember to look up. You never know what you're going to miss if you keep your head at a normal level. Okay, so all basted. Then I just have a little bit of stitching here to do around the neckline. I just have to finish the facing. So the facing I did, is in the style, is an attempt to replicate the style of facing that is on Diego di Cavaniglia's Giornea. And in that one, it's a separate strip of the same fabric as the shell. And then it's just like with the facing on the hem, there's a little bit that peeks out over the edge, over the front. And so, of course, once again, my theory is that this strip is what's going to take any grease from my bodies, any sort of any sweat that comes through, that's going to end up here. And then as needed, I will just change this band out. Diego didn't live long enough, I don't think, for that changing out to be necessary from the time that his Giornea was made to the time he perished and was interred. In case you're wondering, Diego di Cavaniglia died from taking an arrow to the knee at the Siege of Otranto when he was in a crusade trying to fight off the Turks. And he died of infection several days later. So let me tell you, the prebiotic, antibiotic world is a scary one. Definitely a scary one. You know, everyone always, it's a question a lot of people ask me. Do you want to go back and live in the 15th century? No, I do not. I do not want to go back to any century before antibiotics and live. No, thank you. Just no. So many good reasons to not want that. Would I mind taking a day trip with the right precautions and probably a bodyguard? No, I wouldn't mind taking a day trip. The medieval world was super dangerous, people. The pre-modern world was super dangerous. It was not a good place to live. I enjoy recreating specific aspects of the material culture, of the social culture, specifically the courtly aspects. Those are beautiful and lovely, and I love recreating them in the safety of the modern world. I would not want to go and live back then. There are many things I wish we still did from that time, but definitely not enough that the severe risks, especially to me as a woman, would merit the exchange of now for then. Lucretius says there was so much in the Vatican Museum. I'm so glad to have studied various artists so long, and it was just naming names and noting works that I wanted to see. The museum is so big. Yeah, the Vatican Museum is immense. There is so much to see. And I will say at the nighttime, if you go at nighttime to the Vatican Museum, you will not get to see everything. They don't open all of the galleries. I think the Pinacoteca was closed. But honestly, in the time you only have a couple of hours, because it's like from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. or something. You're not you're not going to have enough time to see everything in any case. So they open up sort of, I think, what are the most popular spaces or the best spaces to view at nighttime. And, of course, the Sistine Chapel, just to see that with only a few other people, that alone is worth the price of admission, because the chapel itself is an absolutely enchanting space. The way the slightest whisper sort of echoes around, but echoes, but not clearly. It echoes and becomes muffled. And the lighting is not bright, because obviously they don't want to bleach out these beautiful works of art. So it's at nighttime, and the lighting, it's enough that you can see, but it's not like the lighting is here with these horrible bright LEDs. It is, you can definitely have a magical moment sitting in the Sistine Chapel on a Friday night with only a few other people there. And when there's only a few other people, that has the added effect of encouraging everyone to stay quiet. Because of course, when you have a lot of people, you can talk, and your voice will be lost in the anonymity of the crowd. So people actually are more likely to talk. If there's only 4 other people and you talk, everyone will hear you and glare at you. So it keeps everyone quiet. It's great. And I know there's a lot of controversy about the Vatican's art collection, but the reality is that the European pieces of art were for the most part donated over the centuries by wealthy donors who were hoping to curry favor with the papal state. And I don't see the difference between them being in the Vatican Museum or in any other museum. As long as they're in a museum and they can be seen, then that's great. But like any museum, you can't display everything you have. It's just not possible. So yes, of course, there are going to be things in the archives. Every museum has archives. Every museum has massive storage archives. And the Vatican often lends out its pieces to be displayed in other places. So, I have no issues with the Vatican having a collection. I've heard some people say that they should sell off, the gold, the gold crosses and the gold statuary and all the gold work and the things with gems in it. I'm like, but those are works of art. So if they sell them off, then they'll end up in private collections, and then no one will be able to see them. Or they sell them off and they get melted down for parts. Then that's a hideous crime to melt down medieval works of gold and that have been wrought in gold and gems just to, the idea I heard is that they should then take the money and donate it to the poor. And I'm like, the Catholic Church actually does a lot of charity work, a lot. I would be very sad if they melted down medieval works of art to then donate that money. There's other ways to shepherd, to minister to the poor than to melt down medieval works of art. But that's just me. I cry whenever I hear about medieval works of art being stolen and then melted down for their component parts, which happened relatively recently in the 70s. From Cologne Cathedral, from Aachen Cathedral, was it Cologne? Cologne or Aachen, there was a heist, and a bunch of medieval crosses and chalices and whatnot got stolen, and they got sold off, and they ended up in Bulgaria, and they got melted down. They found them, but by then it was a lump of metal and a lump of gold and loose gems. So I was crying, because the goldsmithing is absolutely an art. Let me see. Yeah. So I don't know. Everyone has their own opinions about what various religious institutions should do with their art collections or the things they have. I just want to make sure that the art doesn't get melted down, that it's there for future generations to admire and appreciate. That's what I think is important. Just considering how to finish this end. No matter what, I'm going to have to trim this. The disadvantage of Diego di Cavaniglia's garments is that the seams had pretty much all given way. For the most part, not much was attached to anything else. There was pieces. Everything was in pieces. Mostly whole pieces, which is great, but there were no seams. So the facing was completely separate from the Jornea itself. And the seams that had connected the two end pieces of the facing were also no longer, there were no more seams. It was just the ends, the threads had rotted away. Which makes me wonder if it was silk or linen, because the silk fibers did pretty well in his tomb. The other ones didn't. So I'm kind of deciding how I want to finish this. And this silk is being a little futzy because it has body. The silk damask has body because of the weave. And so it kind of wants to, I fold it and it wants to unfold itself. I just realized I did not wash my hands before sitting down to sew this morning. Mea maxima culpa. So for those who don't know, haven't thought about this, if you're working, if you're sewing, hand sewing something, especially if it's light colored like this, you really should wash your hands before you sit down and hand sew. Because even if you think your hands are clean, there's oils on them that will have attracted the kind of schmutz that's always floating around in the air. And then you will end up with what I have here, which is not the most brilliant looking facing I've ever seen from the oils in my hands. You know, professional embroiderers wear gloves for that reason, especially when they're working in silk. I tried doing embroidery in gloves and I can't. I need the full dexterity of my fingers. Maybe I had the wrong kind of gloves, but it was not a felicitous experience for me as a creator. It was just frustrating. Mm. I still have audio. I have, does everyone have audio? I wasn't talking, so I fell silent while I thought. Sorry, I've been holding forth for a while and I was just thinking about how I was going to say this. Can everyone still hear me? There is unfortunately a lag, so I'll wait until someone says something. I'm just sorry, I fell deep into thought pondering how exactly I want to finish these two ends. And I think I've come up with a solution that I like. You still have audio? Okay, good. Yeah, I think maybe the audio died because I stopped talking. That happens occasionally. I do fall into thought. That is the disadvantage of me being the sole person whose voice can be heard, is that if I don't talk, no one is actually talking. So yeah, there are times when I do need to actually stop and ponder how I'm going to approach things like finishing these two ends of the facing of the neckline of the Giornea. Very excited at the thought of finally getting to actually wear this. I did actually wear it unfinished during COVID when I was hosting an online ball, but that was inside the great hall of my house. So it was a smooth wooden floor. I wasn't really concerned about the raw edges of the unfinished hem taking damage, but definitely I haven't worn it since then. Ow, well, that was my finger. It's okay. Can always tell when I'm doing large spates of sewing, because then my fingertips end up looking like hamburger from all of the tiny little, because I use my finger as a brace against which to push the needle. And I know people say you should use a thimble. I cannot sew with a thimble. I have tried. I need the dexterity. I don't like, I need to be able to feel. It's not a felicitous thing for me. I haven't tried a ring thimble, actually. Maybe I should get a ring thimble at Pennsic and see how I feel about that. I don't like the thimble that goes all the way over your thumb, though. I would rather just drive the needle into my finger occasionally and retain the dexterity. Okay, so I will see if I can successfully hold this up so you can see um, how I have decided to finish those two ends. So there is, I've basically lapped one of the facings over top of the other end of the facing and tucked it all under. And then I'm just going to do little tiny whip stitches to secure that into place. Yeah, so that's I think that's the winner. And then I'll repeat that for this side as well. That's what I'm going to do there. I'm really liking the way this facing is looking, actually. I like the kind of piped look on the front. And I experimented with a couple of different styles, so that's why it's not all even. Why some of it looks different than others and puffier than others, because I was experimenting with different ways of turning this facing and anchoring this facing. But overall, I'm happy with the look, and I think it looks really neat. It looks tidy, it looks slightly ornamental, and I know that no one should really be looking on the inside of the garment, but I also like how it looks on the inside. So I guess hypothetically, when this is finished, I would be able to actually reverse this and wear this with the russet side out if I really wanted to. It would be completely reversible, because then you just have this nice band, this nice band of color there. So yeah, I'm happy with this, with how it looks. Will you be adding the bottom strip to deal with the dirty streets, Pennsic streets? Yes, for certain. The bottom strip is, where is it? Under my butt. Yes, so this is the bottom strip that will be going on the back. I will ultimately put it on the front as well. And will also be going on the back that I just basted. So what will happen is just like I did on the Gamora, which you will hopefully see in the upcoming vlog entries, basically like this much will be protruding out, and this will be the thing that will be dragging on the ground. And I'm going with this relatively narrow strip because this is the width of the one that is on the Osana's Gamora, and we'll see how I feel about that. Obviously, and this is also the width of the ones that are on, like the Pisa gown has this kind of strip on the inside as well. And Eleonora de Toledo's other gowns have a strip like this on the inside that's about this width. There is a linen gown from 1550, a linen sotana, that blue linen actually, that has a much wider band at the bottom on the inside. And so I might consider, I'll see how it works with this width of band, and I might consider doing a wider one next time. The thing about trains though, is that it really is generally only the edges of the train that actually trail on the ground, because when you walk, it pulls up off of the ground. The action of you walking causes it to sort of tent out. So there isn't that much that's actually dragging on the ground necessarily on something this light. Anyway, this is pretty light and airy. My burgundian gown, my pink one, is much heavier, so more of it does drag on the ground for certain. Yeah, so we'll see. We'll see how I feel about after testing it out, and we'll see how it goes. Part of the fun, and I did say this last night, and again, I apologize to anyone who has heard me say this before, but I will say it again. One of the things I love about 15th century fashion and recreating 15th century clothing and earlier is that there are so many questions that can't be easily answered, that you can only answer by putting together the pieces of a very complex puzzle. And I love the challenge of the puzzle. I love being able to experiment and having to experiment because we don't know, because there are so few extant garments, because there's only so far that iconography can get you in terms of how things are actually constructed. And I love the ability to experiment with different things, whereas the more forward you go in time, the closer you get to our modern era, there are many fewer questions, and to the point where there are no questions, because by the 19th century you have detailed sewing manuals telling you how to construct the garment step by step, and so there's no question. as to how to construct the garments if you just follow the instructions that were published in the 19th century. So that's why I'm less interested in making clothing from that era, not because I don't like, I love all, it's pretty much most eras of fashion I can find, I find appealing. Not so much in the first millennium in Northern Europe, not really, it doesn't interest me, um, but still, I prefer the earlier garments because there is a challenge of thought and creativity that is required in order to recreate the garments, because the answers aren't just laid out for you. And each new discovery is all the more exciting because there's so few discoveries that have been made. So going forward, new discoveries are exciting. Whereas when I read a news article that says, you know, well-preserved gown from 1812 found in wall of house. I'm like, okay, there's literally thousands of gowns that have survived from that year. So I'm not terribly excited by that. Yeah. Whereas gown found in wall of 15th century castle, that is super exciting. Yeah. So yeah, I'm at Pennsic. If anyone who's at Pennsic, my apprentice and I will be doing some reconstruction efforts on my Burgundian gown, which I mentioned earlier, if you're just joining this. Also, by the way, guys, please do hit the thumbs up if you haven't. And after the video publishes, if you could go back and just leave even just an emoji under the actual comments and not just the chat, really helps promote my channel, blah, blah, blah. You know the drill. It's terrible that I have to say these things, but that's the only way that channels actually grow and survive. And of course, share with anyone whom you think might find my blatherings interesting. Anyway, at Pennsic, we're going to be doing a kind of 911 fix the fit of this dress clinic on this 15th century Burgundian gown that I made for my coronation back in 2009 that did not fit properly in the shoulders. And so we're going to be reconstructing the neckline and probably the arm's eye and the sleeve cap. So if you'd like to come and, oh, these are terrible stitches, right? Goodness gracious. Bad, bad, bad. Can't believe I just made stitches that crappy. If you would like to come and be part of that process, witness and ask questions, make suggestions, I think my Lucrezia and I will we'll compare our schedules and we'll actually set a time and I'll set up an event. And we will live stream it, so you can join in as well via live stream, or if you wish to come in person, come in person. I think it will be an interesting experience. It will not be bombastic. It will not be fast. It will be a slow process, right? This is not something we're going to be rushing. So don't expect roller coaster thrills. Expect a calm, meditated, thoughtful process, but plenty of chance to ask questions and think along, mitdenken, as they say in German, if you care to be part of that intellectualization of the patterning process. Oh, yes, these stitches are much better. I don't know what the hell that was before. And next time, I promise, when we do a live stream, I will have this camera figured out about how to turn the sound off. And then we will have the earlier sip and stitch has a camera of me actually stitching. I will have that the next time for certain. So if you watch the recording from the earlier sip and stitch, you can actually see me stitching as well as talking. And I'm sorry that didn't work out for today. I promise I will get all this technology stuff figured out. Let me tell you, it's hard being a one-person production company. I literally do it all. I do sound, I do camera, I do costuming, I do scripting, I do concept, I do storyboarding, I do editing, I do, and the actual creation itself. So I am literally a one-person production company. And at this point, I'd probably make way more money if I just got hired to do video production, because I've gained so much experience for it, and it would certainly pay way better than YouTube does. But would be great is if my channels could grow to the point where I can actually pay other people to handle the technical aspects of production, and I can focus on the core business in the case of this, of, living history, material culture exploration, and my travel channel of just actually traveling and documenting that experience and sharing it with people rather than having to also then edit all the content into something digestible. That's my goal, is to grow my channels to the point where I can actually provide a good paying job to someone else to do it. Like, I really do have dreams of being the kind of employer that I wish there were more of, where my employees get like 5 weeks of paid leave a year and have good health care and all that sort of stuff. That would be lovely. I would love to be able to have that kind of business. Right now, I don't even get paid time off. Uh, it's a hard knock life for me. No, it really isn't. I'm an extremely privileged person, so don't pity me, please. uh, Comment, very interesting challenges indeed, and it allows you to express your own creativity. From Marie-Laure. Yes, talking about 15th century, exploring 15th century clothing and earlier. Yeah, it really, I have to say, the expressing my creativity is really a key part of why I enjoy doing the earlier periods. Because the later you get, if you're doing historically accurate clothing, there isn't as much room for the creativity part, at least not in the engineering of the garments. Obviously you can still be creative in how you choose your colors and your fabrics and your notions and whatnot for certain, but I enjoy the creativity of engineering. There's garment engineering is fascinating to me. I love figuring out the shapes and how to make it work. Like patterning, I love patterning. I enjoy it so much. And the thrill of success when I have successfully created a pattern myself from scratch that actually looks exactly like the thing in the pictures, that I can ride that high for days. Okay. Yes, this looks nice. I like this. And then there was another comment. Do you know of any medieval or Renaissance clothing in Spain or Portugal? Yes. Yes, I do. Portugal, not so much. Portugal has a very sad story when it comes to its medieval heritage. There was a massive earthquake in the 18th century that literally set the country on fire. It was like a 7 point something on the Richter scale. And of course, at that point, and it happened during a religious festival when there were a maximum number of candles burning, like a saint's feast day, and I don't remember which one, maximum candles burning across the entire kingdom. And the earthquake happened and it set the entire place on fire. And so that's why there is almost no artwork from medieval Portugal, because it all went up in flames. That's why the Alfonso V series altarpiece is so immensely important, because it's one of the few pieces that has survived from Portugal. So the same thing, no doubt, happened to probably all of the kind of extant medieval garments that had probably ended up in church reliquaries, and probably that were even in chests in storage. They all went up in flames. So I don't know of anything from Portugal. Spain, though, is a treasure trove of extant medieval garments. Oh my gosh, from the 12th century to the 16th century, so many extant garments. There's something about the climate there. When they inter people in crypts, the clothes don't rot. It's great. There is a book, looking to see if I have it out in my pile. I do. I have it out here in my pile of currently being used for my vlog books. This book, Kleidung im Mittelalter. I think there's an English version as well by Katrin Kania. I think it's unfortunately probably going to show the reverse, but maybe you can make it out anyway. This book is excellent because it actually compiles in one source an immense number of extant garments with details of the stitches, where they were found, when they were found, the fabric, the weave of the fabric, the spin of the fabric, the seams that were used. And then it also provides, for most things, many things, it provides diagrams for, you know, that kind of help you visualize the actual garments. And this actually has quite a few pieces from Spain in it, some of which I was aware of. The 12th and 13th century ones I was aware of. I was not aware of some of the 15th century ones that they talk about in this book. So yes, there are absolutely extant garments from Spain from this period. This book even has some extant medieval garments from Finland from the 15th century. I didn't even know there were extant garments from Finland. Instruction, sewing techniques, a manual. Now, not e-manual, a space manual. You know, you don't necessarily have to agree with all of her conclusions in her introductory chapters, but it's a pretty damned good book. It's a pretty good book, and I'm pretty certain there is an English version as well. I think I saw on Google Books there was an English version, or at least there was an English like abstract. Oh, an English summary. There's an English summary. But even for people who don't speak German, I would recommend purchasing this book just for the massive collection of pictures. And then at least you can use Google Translate in your phone to kind of get a rough idea, but then at least you can go to the places, the museums where these places are kept, and see what information they may have. So can recommend. One of the ones about Spain that's in here, it's actually, she has a couple of color plates. I'm thinking of a different book. Yeah, color plates. Right. Okay. So this is a museum in the Museum of Valladolid. Check this out. 15th century. It's a child's dress, but still, I mean, if this, and this is why I said I want to go to Spain too on that garment tour, extant garment tour. You know, high waisted. Look at this fabric. And the stitches are still in place. I think they're original. I don't think they had to resew it, as most of these garments have to be resewn together to actually put them on display. So yeah, there are definitely. Oh, here's some more Spanish stuff. This is Spanish, 13th century. This is all Spanish. This is the man's bliot that I've talked about earlier. This is basically a surcoat, one of those really nifty side lace surcoats that are very typical of medieval Spain, of 13th and 14th century Spain. Yeah, so Spain has a remarkably large number of extant garments, you know, especially the 12th century stuff. I said this in my sip and stitch from earlier, that the 12th century, you know, if I were still doing 12th century, which was my first love, was the 12th century, before I realized we knew nothing about dance in the 12th century. But I still love the clothing from the 12th century. It's so elegant and so flattering, and just, you know, trains and long sleeves. It takes up space, and I love clothes that take up space. But, you know, if I were doing 12th century still, and I'm kind of interested in going back and taking advantage of the findings we now have versus what we didn't know 25 years ago, I would definitely look at the Spanish stuff for my sewing techniques. Because yes, obviously, Spain was a bit of an outlier in a lot of ways in terms of material culture, because of, you know, Andalus and the Moça culture and the Moorish culture and all of that big blending. But still, I would use the Spanish 12th century garments as the basis for sewing technique and construction if I were doing 12th century French or Italian or whatever, because as far as I know, there are no 12th century extant garments in France. I say as far as I know because there probably is something in some little obscure church treasury somewhere. Okay, so let's see. This is what it looks like. The finished edging there. I'm very happy with how that looks. That looks nice and neat. And so, yeah, I'm about to do that on the other side. Let me check the comments. Can you put the info for the book in the video description? Yes, I can. I can also, just give me a second, I can put it in this chat too. Kleidung im Mittelalter, Katrin Kania. Okay. That's the name of the book and the author. I will also, when this publishes, I'll add it to the description. I do also have on my channel, you might want to check out, I have a couple of videos on books, just on books that you might want to add to your collection for medieval fashion. So you might want to check those out. They were published a couple of years ago, so they'll be further back in the catalog. Where I discuss some books people know about, and some I know people definitely do not know about. Yeah, so now I think I'm just going to do that exact same thing to this side. I'm just going to wrap one over top of the other, fold it under, and do that nice, neat little boxing thing. Yeah. I think that went really well. Okay. Yeah, this Kleidung im Mittelalter, when I found this book, I don't even remember how I found this book. I think I was doing a search for an image of a specific extant garment, and it came up, the image for that garment came up tied to this book. And then when I looked into the book, I realized it was a book I needed to have. She also has a lot of the Greenland gowns included in it. So if you don't already have the books on the Greenland gowns, that could be useful as well. I'm not even going to pretend to pronounce the name of that place where these gowns were found because I don't know how to speak Icelandic to pronounce Icelandic, or the version of Icelandic that is spoken in Greenland. So I'm not even going to try. Yeah, but it's definitely there's actually some other extant Italian gowns from earlier. There's the dress of Saint Clara, who was of course a contemporary and colleague of Saint Francis, and there are extant garments from earlier in Italy. It's the 15th century where there's this hole, or had been this hole until recently. Can always rely on saints' clothing to be preserved. It's why we have an undershirt from the 13th century, because it was King Louis's shirt, but he was canonized. And so because he was canonized, his shirt has actually survived. Had he not been canonized, we might know nothing about 13th century undershirts and how they were constructed. You are welcome, Lisa. And may you use it in good health. And like I said, even if you don't necessarily understand German, Google Translate or any kind of Google Papago is we use that in Korea. I don't know if there's any other language other than Korean. But if there is, Papago is very good at doing, taking a picture and then you sort of scrub in what you would like translated. And then it provides a pretty reasonable translation. This is one of the reasons that my career as a professional translator is basically dead, is all of these translation apps that are getting very, very, very good, disturbingly good. And thus the Creative Contessa was born as a business to try to find a new way to make a living in this increasingly automating world. Okay, so let me see. I want to not cut too much off, but I want to cut enough to decision. This other side I hadn't yet trimmed up, so I have to be careful about how much I trim up. I don't want to trim too far back. Okay. Yeah, I'm certain that looked very coldly calculated, very carefully calculated. It was not. So, does anyone else have any other projects that are ongoing, creative or otherwise? Culinary, textile, crafting, something else, travel plans? I think I just mentioned that I'm going to put together a tour of extant medieval garments of Europe, which I promise will be more than just looking at moldering garments worn by dead people. We will do more than that. We will go to museums, we'll have cultural experiences. It will be a grand old time. for anyone who decides they want to join. Oh, see, I am thinking about actually possibly doing Carnevale in Venice this year. Because many of my friends do Carnevale, so thinking of making that part of my February activities. Let me see. Comment. I was amazed to see how tiny the pleating was in the shirt worn by the de Medici brother that was killed in the church by stabbing. Giuliano. Yeah, Giuliano's shirt. Yeah. Giuliano de Medici was Florence's flower of chivalry. He was the knight's knight. And he, I, his death is one of those turning points of Florentine history. I suspect that there would not have been a period, the Medici would never have been exiled from Florence had he not died, because Lorenzo died very young. He died at like 43. If Giuliano had still been alive, he would have taken over. He was powerful, he was charismatic, he was handsome as hell. He would have taken over, and goodness knows how the course of history might have been completely altered, considering that the Medici worked their way up into becoming queens, plural, of France. So yeah, it was Giuliano who was killed in the church during mass. Yeah, stabbed to death. In the Palazzo d'Avanzati, if you go, there is actually that moment. That day was commemorated in graffiti on the wall, in the waiting area. I think it's the kitchen, actually. I'm trying to remember which hall it was. I don't remember in which room it was, but it was actually recorded. Giuliano de Medici killed in the cathedral on this day, and they wrote the date. And it's written in this, very 15th century handwriting. It's really creepy. It's, yeah, it's definitely sort of one of those moments that gives you chills, it's interesting when history is corroborated, when great history with a capital H is corroborated by sort of little history, the history of the people as noted by the regular, average, everyday people. And some average, everyday person wrote on the wall of this palazzo that Giuliano de Medici had been killed. It was such an important event in the city for the factions. It was a real crackdown, too. It actually was one of the reasons that resulted in also the loss of civic rights for certain groups of people. Yeah, it was a piece of his shirt when he was attacked. Yeah. Oh, they brought that piece of shirt out. Yeah. So for those who don't know, that shirt, I actually read that might not be his shirt. It's identified as being his shirt, but the style of shirt is more 16th century than 15th century. And so this, I think something in my memory is triggering that because I just stumbled across that chunk of shirt a couple of months ago, and I was shocked that I'd never heard of it before. And then in the same report that talked about the shirt, I think they've read that it was reportedly his shirt, but probably not, I think. Now I've got to go look that up and double check that memory is correct. Let's see. Lisa says, I'm learning to dye with natural dyes, planning my dye garden for the next year. Oh, a dye garden, how lovely. I played around with natural dyes about 15 years ago, living in an apartment. I will never do that again. I wanted to eventually, I actually bought a massive, massive copper dye pot. I mean, immense. It's actually like this sausage pot from the old style German washing machines. And when we were trapped in Albuquerque during COVID, and we actually had a yard, I had planned to actually get a frame for it, and I was actually going to do some dyeing in our backyard using this giant copper pot. And I was just so depressed during COVID to be trapped in Albuquerque in the United States and not able to leave and go other places that I didn't end up doing it. I will admit, I was pretty depressed during that time. So yeah, natural dyeing is a lot of fun and very satisfying. I had a lot of lessons learned because when I was doing it back in 2005, there wasn't a whole lot of good information out about medieval dyeing and how to do it properly. And so I was really just making it up as I went along. And I bought some cochineal. I mean, fresh, like whole cochineal, not ground. No, whole cochineal. I had to grind it myself, and I used cochineal. I was trying to achieve Kermes red, and I did not achieve Kermes red. I achieved purple because the first pot I used, the not ceramic, glazing. It was the ceramic lining. That's not the right word, but the way pots are, metal pots tend to have some are finished on the inside, and this one had ceramic glazing on the inside. Well, some of it had broken away, and I didn't realize that. So the dye bath actually came in contact with the iron, and the iron turned the dye bath purple. Interesting, right? Yeah. But I didn't want purple. I wanted red. Okay, so then tried a different pot. And, definitely the pH wasn't right. I ended up just getting a bright magenta pink out of the Kermes. Really bright pink. Not out of the Kermes, because Kermes is basically extinct, out of the cochineal. Definitely not what we were going for either. But that was it. That was the fabric for the doublet, the pourpoint that I was making for my then husband for Crown Tournament. So he got a bright magenta pourpoint, which actually looked great with the puffy sleeves. It actually looked really good on him. His complexion suited pink well. And he was confident enough in his masculinity that he didn't care that it was bright pink. So win-win all around. But yeah, using cochineal in my apartment, cochineal does not smell really great when you boil it or cook it at high temperatures. It is not a scent that anyone should be courting. And my entire apartment smelled that way, like cooking insects. So there were a lot of lessons learned. And then I read that in the 17th century, they figured out how to get cochineal to turn a bright red by adding stannous chloride. Stannous chloride is tin chloride, basically. It's toxic if you breathe it. I didn't know that, though. So I added stannous chloride to the dye bath in the hopes that it would turn it red. It did not turn it red. It just turned it a deeper pink. And also, I potentially exposed myself to toxic fumes. Look, I didn't know. This was a long time ago, and I've learned so much about so many things since then. Yeah. Thankfully, I didn't inhale a toxic amount of stannous chloride. Good on me. Could have been worse. But yeah, so I played around with cochineal and weld and indigo I've experimented with. Trying to think if there's any other of the natural dyes I've experimented with before realizing that doing it in an apartment was not a good idea and basically giving up. But there is something I love. One of the things I love about dye baths is the chemistry aspect of it, of how making it more alkali or more acid can just completely change the color in the pot. It's just absolutely fascinating. And doing over dyes and using fermented urine to, mordant your dye. It's really gratifying, natural dyeing is. Comment, I used to work for a fashion house as a cutter here that does all natural dyes. It was so cool. They even let me play with the scrap piece and do an indigo dye dip. Question is, I'm at Lisa, what plants are you using? And she says Japanese indigo, madder, marigolds, and coreopsis. I have used madder. I also did madder dyeing, actually. I have a piece of silk that I experimented with madder dyeing. It actually came out as a rust-colored red. Unfortunately, because I didn't understand the proper finishing techniques and post-dyeing baths, the fabric is pretty brittle. I made a pair of stockings out of it, and after 3 wearings, I had already worn through them, which, yes, okay, my feet do eat through stockings like piranha in the Amazon River, but 3 wearings is a bit excessive. So, and when I pulled on the fabric, it gave pretty easily. So I'm pretty certain that my treatment I did not give it the proper post bath spa treatment to make it nice and soft and supple, and so it was just fragile. But there's so much more information available now. I mean, and really, there's the internet is a treasure trove, can be if you use it properly, can be a treasure trove of such valuable and enriching and useful information that just it wasn't webbed 15, 16, 20 years ago. It wasn't webbed 20 years ago. This kind of information wasn't out there. I said this in the earlier Sip and Stitch, and I'll whinge about it again. If the information that is available now had been available when I started this medievalist journey, I can't even imagine how far along I'd be in the process. It's unfair. No, I'm teasing. You know, the journey has been an exciting and an interesting one. Being alive through many of these major discoveries and aware of them as they came out has been very exciting. You know, whereas people coming to it now with all these discoveries just kind of part of the standard available offerings, that's not as, you know, there's no thrill in that. I guess there's a thrill if you find out about it for the first time, maybe. Yeah. It's not the same, though. Not the same as, you know, reading the academic paper just released on the Langberg finds. Oh, weld as well. Yeah, we did an indigo, we did a indigo base dye and a weld over dye to get green. And that worked really well. And we did use strong urine for that one. That was a fun experiment. I actually still have the silk thread that we dyed for that with that weld in my storage thing. Actually, 20 years later, I've been saving it for the right embroidery project because it was very nice silk indeed. And the weld did produce a really lovely, lovely yellow. I plan mostly on dyeing fibers for embroidery. Ha, funny. And I just mentioned that I was using them for embroidery. Yeah, something I've learned in my explorations of the garment production process in the 15th century is that, you know, they apparently, you know, sometimes they dyed threads before weaving, and just as often, if not more often, they would actually just dye the whole length of fabric after it had been completely woven. So it really depended on what kind of fabric they were weaving, whether the dyeing came before or after the weaving. And of course it would, you know, in some cases create a completely different look to the color. I should have used blind stitches. Oh well. But there is, I have to say, natural dyeing is a very satisfying activity when it goes the way you hope it will. Very satisfying. Yeah. Especially for people like me who enjoy the sort of the magic of chemistry. I know there's probably scientists who are cringing if I say that, but you know, chemistry was really the first magic, right? Before you understand the principles, the results of chemical interactions seem magical. And in some cases still seem magical, even once you understand the principles. You know, why take away that whimsy from the world? We need more whimsy in our lives. Lisa, what kind of embroidery do you do? Do you pursue different kinds? The next thing I want to pursue is hors nuée. Yeah, I'm really excited about trying out hors nuée, which for those who don't know, hors nuée is where you lay down a ground of gold embroidery thread, gold thread, and then you go over top with silk threads in different colors to create shading and differences in light. And the most ornate embroideries from the 15th century are ornuées. And so I was really thinking ornuée might be what I want to do for the embroidery on this crivelli gown I'm considering doing. So I'm excited to try my hand at it. Might actually, at Pennsic, I might see if anyone is teaching a class on ornuée and actually take a class instead of just trying to figure it out for myself. I mean, I will say, it brings me back to the conversation about enjoying the creativity of exploration. And so, you know, I do really enjoy figuring things out for myself. So it might take away some of the pleasure if I just learn what someone else already knows directly from them. On the other hand, I don't feel that I have to reinvent the wheel every time, that it's okay if someone else has reinvented it and I can just learn it from them. That's okay too. I have to tell myself that, by the way. That's me psyching myself up to go and take a class instead of just figuring it out myself. Because the reality is that if I just wait for me to figure it out, or I force myself to figure it out in order to do it, it's less likely I will actually get around to doing it. Whereas if I actually just take a class on it, someone else teaches me how to do it, then I can just jump right in and skip the experimentation part. It's okay to do that. It really is, Rachel. You can skip the experimentation part sometimes. It's fine. There's no shame in that. I'm talking to myself again, by the way. This is my own neurosis. Let's see. My background is cross stitch, I think. Then Lucrezia says, I took a class on ornuée at Pennsic. It was very good. Yeah, that's why I'm thinking of going there. And then Lisa says, she's thinking of the bayou stitch so she can do stuff for her daughter. Oh yeah, the bayou stitch is I love the bayou stitch. It's so neat. It's so organized and clean, and it creates a really nice three-dimensional set of imagery. Yeah, the bayou stitch is great. By the way, the bayou, it is not the thing that people call the bayou tapestry is not a tapestry. Tapestry is actually a form of weaving. Tapestries should technically be woven. It's really a wall hanging. It is the bayou wall hanging. But that's just me as a linguist and entomologist being pedantic. But I think in German they call it correctly Wandbehänge. I don't think they call it tapisserie. Yeah. Sort of like someone commented under one of my getting dressed as the Burgundian Contessa videos. They commented, because I comment that the gown is made out of satin. And they say, well, I didn't think satin is a modern thing, isn't it? I'm like, oh, no. Satin made out of polyester or acetate is a modern thing. Satin as a weave is a very old weave. We have satin. I think I've seen some extant bits of satin from Egypt from like the 5th or 6th century. I mean, like little tiny pieces, but no, sorry. No, not satin. Satin was invented in the Song dynasty in the 11th century, 10th or 11th century. Sorry, but we have extant pieces in China from dating back to then, and that's kind of when the process is documented. So satin as a weaving technique has been around for over 1,000 years. You can basically take most any fiber and weave it in a satin weave. It's a specific way of weaving the warp and the weft. The pattern that you use to weave creates the satin effect. Silk, being the fiber with the most luster, is the best choice for it because it's naturally lustrous. Then when you give it a weave that makes it even more lustrous, you have super luster. But you can make satin out of cotton, hypothetically out of linen, maybe. I mean, I have satin that's a linen silk blend, so I guess so. Although really the linen isn't showing, it's kind of hidden by the silk. I've even seen a wool satin. So yeah, satin is not a fiber, it's a weave. Pro tip for those who might just be coming into the fiber arts world, there are fibers and there are weaves. So you can have silk velvet, silk satin, silk taffeta, silk chiffon. You can also have acetate silk or acetate taffeta, acetate satin, acetate chiffon, etc. So when you're buying a fabric, make sure that you know the fiber content what it actually is, because especially online, there are a lot of unscrupulous vendors who will say that it's silk, whatever, but then in the fine print, they mention faux silk, fake silk. So yeah, be wary. Okay, well, that is now done also. This is this side. Yeah, yep. The other end is now done. So yeah, I'm very happy how this neckline has turned out. I'll go ahead and pop it on over top of my doggery so you can see what it looks like as it hangs in general. I know, I'm sorry, camera's a little close. I wanted you to be able to see me. Okay, so here's how it looks in the front. Yeah, I like that. I like how it needs to be ironed a little bit, but that's okay. Let me see, it's sitting a little, yeah, okay. So there's where it should sit when it's on. There it is from the side. And then from the back. Pull my hair out of the way so you can see the back. Okay, so now we just have to attach the band on the bottom. But it's been a couple of hours that I've been hosting this. So I'm going to 2.5 hours actually. Just gonna look in the final comments. I'm gonna give everyone chance to make some final comments. If you have any questions, go ahead and pop them in the chat. And I'm just gonna look through the chat and see what we've got there. Ah, 16th century German and Tudor Elizabethan. Yes, so much fine needlepoint in the 16th century. Some really elaborate stuff too, especially in the second half of the 16th century. Yeah. So yeah. Next step will be to pin on, well, trim up the back of that train where the threads have all worn away at the very end from my Roomba having its way with it and all the travel. And then I will be attaching the band. And actually, I'm going to probably do the same thing that I did. I think I'm going to apply the same technique that I did with the Gamora, which is I'm not going to baste on the band, the band on the hem. I'm actually the facing on the hem. I'm actually just going to counterfold as I work along like that, because that worked out pretty well on the Gamora. Granted, there was only 2 layers of fabric instead of 3 layers of fabric, but I think it should work. It worked out pretty well, and it saved me an extra step of extra basting when it didn't seem to be necessary ultimately. So I think that will be the next step. Trim up, and then hem up. And then she'll actually be wearable for Pennsic. That's exciting, guys. Okay, well, I think I'm going to be doing this weekly because I have lots of sewing to do. Next week, you might actually get to see me work on the fur to prepare the fur, because the fur bands can't just be attached. I actually have to put strips, finish each plate, as they're called in the furrier industry, with strips around the edges so that the edges are strong, so that when I actually whip stitch them together, they hold. So yeah. Oh, kitties, you want to see the, oh, okay. Hold on a minute. Let me, well, you can hear me talking. I'll go get our little baby kitty. I'll show you Chimi. Chimi, come here, baby. I know you're sleeping. It's okay. It's okay. Sleepy Chimi. Okay. This is Chimi. He's a very good big brother to Nabi. Nabi is the name of the kitten. He's been very good to her. He plays with her, he grooms with her, he disciplines her when she gets too feisty. He unfortunately had a kind of sad story because when he was rescued and fostered, for the first 2 months, his foster didn't understand about fostering, and because he was a feral kitten, he hissed and he spit and he scratched, and so the man who was fostering him just left him alone for 2 months. I mean, he fed him and he changed his litter box, but he didn't interact with him. So Chimi had to be socialized when we adopted him, but he's gotten very good now. He's still a little He's still a little hesitant, but he's very sweet. He's our sweet kitty. He really is quite sweet. And I really love the relationship he's formed with Nobby. He's become a very good big brother. Um, Isaac, could you bring Nobby over? Sorry, he's still a little paranoid about my son. This is my youngest stepchild who just woke up. So this is Nobby, for those who haven't met her yet. She's a cutie. She was sleeping, so she's definitely looking really sleepy. She has a really good purr. So say bye, Nobby. Bye. She's not going to be this small for long. When we adopted her, when we took her to the vet for her to try to save her, and saved her successfully, she actually fit in the palm of my hand. She was so little. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Chew on my hair. Make sausage poos. In case you're wondering what that means, these kitties like to eat my hair, and then it does interesting things to their poo. It produces what I call sausage poos. So, yeah, get that for an image. Okay, everyone. Well, I will see you at our next Sip and Chat. The next vlog for the Gamara will be getting published today, so keep your eyes open for that. Otherwise, thank you all for joining me for the day, everyone. Remember to please do drop an emoji once this publishes in the comments. Otherwise, until next time, guys, stay creative. Bye, everyone. Oh, little baby. Yeah, baby. We're gonna go back to sleep.